Nice morning to everyone, and welcome to our equity strategy webinar entitled Market Watch: How Oil and Conflict Affect Daily Life. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us today. We all know that oil prices don't just move the markets, they influence everything from transportation cost to the price of basic goods. So today we'll be unpacking how global conflict and rising prices impact not only our day-to-day expenses, but also our long-term investment decisions. So this session today is brought to you by BPI Trade, and we're very excited to guide you through this very relevant discussion for both our consumers, our clients, and investors. We appreciate your presence and we hope you find valuable insights that you can use in your financial journey. To help us dive deeper into today's topic, we are joined by the BPI Trade research team. Our main speaker this morning is Rachel Cruz, Senior Research Equity Analyst, and she will be joined later on for the Q&A by our other fellow research analysts, Greg Ilag, Alistair Del Rosario, Dan Brian Go, and Paul Padit. So they will be leading the discussion and sharing their insights on the current oil market, geopolitical risks, and what these mean for us as investors. And we're very fortunate to have this group with us today. So let's get started. To begin our main program, I'll turn over the virtual floor to the BPI research team for their presentation today. So, Rach, the floor is yours.
Yes, nice morning, everyone. So the title of our webinar for today is Philippine Equities Amid the Oil Shock. So for this session, we will be providing key updates at the macro level. We'll also be discussing some sector and stock picks that we are looking into for the next 12 months. So just to start off on the Philippine equity market, this is a one-year chart of the PSEI. And as we can notice in this slide, the PSEI has been trading between the 5,500 to 6,600 range as a result of a multitude of domestic and external issues. So to start of the year, actually, we were already up by about 20% already. But as we all know, the index has given up most of its gains due to the US-Iran conflict. Just to further discuss about what's happening right now, this is a diagram we sourced from the BPI Global Markets team to help us understand how the oil supply shock is transmitted to domestic inflation. First is on Forex, as the weaker peso leads to higher costs for imported goods. Then, of course, on the supply chains and the transport costs, as the logistics network uses fuel as a primary input. For example, we are already seeing fare hikes for PUVs, then fuel surcharge also for airfares. Lastly, on commodities, as there is a ripple effect on the supply chain, specifically for food commodities and other power substitutes. We'll discuss more of this in the next slides. Now, going through what's happening, how is it being transmitted to the GDP? This is mostly through the consumer accounts, such as OFW remittances, tourism and travel, as well as consumer confidence to spend. As we know, more than 70% of our GDP are consumption related. Other than that, government spending may also be constrained for infra-related projects, as funds will likely be diverted now towards intervention measures to address potentially high inflation. So this includes subsidies for transport and agriculture and possible suspension of the fuel excise tax. Diving deeper, about half of the CPI basket is accounted for by three major items. These are food, electricity, and transport. And for those curious on how the weights are assigned, this is computed based on the typical Filipino family's expenditure according to the Philippine Statistics Authority survey. And from the inflation figure in February, we were already seeing price pressures both on food and energy. So for food, mainly this is being driven by the month-on-month increases for rice as well as cereals. So another key risk to consumption is of course for OFWs. Nearly a million OFWs are located in the Middle East and they account for 18% of remittances in 2025. And from our end, we are also monitoring two key things. First is coal, and then next is agricultural commodity prices. As you can see on the left chart, coal prices have also been moving up higher by 20% year to date due to it being a reliable power substitute for both natural gas and oil. Meanwhile, on the right chart are the top imported commodities of our covered consumer names, and the trajectory so far is also moving higher, with some of the increases eventually being passed on to their products, or else these consumer companies will face margin compression. Then zooming in further to our power sector, if you look at the data from the Department of Energy, actually about 70% of our coal requirements are imported, majority from Indonesia. So 77% of the Philippine generation mix is also sourced from coal and natural gas, and the higher prices for both is feeding through to WESM or the power spot prices. In short, the consumers will feel the pain not only in the pump prices, but also on their electricity bills. The good news is we are gradually moving away from imported energy dependence. The Department of Energy's goal is to source 35% of power from renewable energy by 2030, which is up from 22% in 2024. To summarize, these are the key macro forecasts of the bank. The base case scenario as of yesterday still assumes that the conflict will be resolved, which would enable a GDP recovery towards the second half of this year. However, we don't expect any rate cut from the BSP anymore, so we are retaining the policy rate at 4.25%. Now, for a 1 month conflict, economic recovery is expected to be delayed, with inflation moving above the 4% ceiling of the BSP target range. We see a path for a 50 bips rate hike to 4.75% for the central bank to be able to anchor inflation expectations. And for a 6 months or more conflict, we see a more precarious scenario with a significant deceleration of GDP, higher inflation of above 5%, and a potential 150 bips rate hike by the BSP. So in both the 1 month conflict and the 6 months or more conflict scenarios, the peso is expected to weaken and breach the 60 level. Now, moving forward, or moving to the markets, given what we discussed earlier on the scenario analysis, we have seen a strong sell-off across the board for Philippine assets. So these prices were as of last Friday, and the PSEI was already down by 8% month to date, while the peso was among the biggest loser in the region, down by close to 4% month to date. We note also that the bonds are also being sold off, with the 10-year bond rate hitting 6.8% yesterday from just 6% to start the year. Notably, during the last 10 trading sessions of the PSEI, we also saw foreign investors being net sellers for the market. However, I think even this morning, the market continues to hold above the 6,000 level. And we think that the sustained sharp decline is counterbalanced by already low valuations and earnings expectations for the market. If we look at the table, the PCI is trading at 9 times, equates to a nearly 40% discount from the 10-year mean of 15 times. This is also the widest discount applied for Asian markets. Now, the chart on the right shows you the observable implied equity risk premium of the market. So this is computed by getting the difference between the earnings yield of the PSEI and the real 10-year bond yield. So basically, the spread, it means that investors require more premium if there is risk, for example, what's happening now. And so far, we are seeing that the premium is close to 7% already, and that's one standard deviation from where the mean is, and is also similar to the levels seen during the pandemic. Also, we look back to two recent high inflation periods, the supply side shock induced inflation in 2018 and the Russia-Ukraine conflict induced inflation in 2022. There are glaring similarities when we compare what's happening now versus the past two periods, especially if we look at the potential inflation path, the 10-year BVAL movement, as well as the peso weakness. But what's different this time around is that the economy is on a more fragile state, with GDP at just about 4.4% in 2025. So from our perspective, this would make a prolonged turmoil in the Middle East more painful for our consumers. For the PSEI, as what I mentioned earlier, the year-to-date decrease was not as steep, although we're already down by about 1% year-to-date already. As what we saw in the previous slide, we think that it's really a factor of valuations and earnings expectations being low already, or maybe the market is not yet pricing in a prolonged conflict. Nonetheless, during these times when earnings visibility is clouded by exogenous shocks, focus shifts to the balance sheet strength as well as the earnings resilience. And we see some sectors faring better than the others. So this is just a simple assessment that we did for covered names. And it shows you, the chart shows you that local companies will be able to withstand a macro stress as majority have healthy gearing levels. So we use the debt to equity ratio as a measure of the indebtedness of these companies. And for our covered names, only three have more than 2 times debt to equity ratio. So for SEB, this was mostly a combination of pandemic-related debt and the continued expansion of its fleet. So for telcos, the impact of potentially higher interest rates is mitigated by the leveraging efforts, which includes the possible monetization of its assets, decreased capex intensity, as well as higher free cash flow generation. Now, the most at risk to a combination of a weak peso and high inflation is the consumer sector. Retail should benefit from essential spending, while restaurants and consumer food and beverage manufacturing will be affected as margins could compress amid high commodity costs. So during this times having a strong pricing power is key. Meanwhile, we think that a port operator, ICT, power and utilities, as well as mining, have the most defensive business models among our coverage. Then just to specifically discuss about the REITs and the recent price correction, our property and REITs analyst Paul will be discussing more about this later during the Q&A. But we note that the impact of a weak peso and high inflation is mitigated as REITs typically have long contracts with specific escalation rates. So the pipeline infusion from sponsors are also still in place, although market conditions may not be as accommodating due to the recent volatility. However, what's actually putting pressure on REIT prices is the significant jump in bond yields in response to rising inflation expectations. So the 10-year bond yield as of yesterday is at 6.8%. So in essence, the yields of the REITs have to catch up to where the risk-free rate is, leading to price corrections. So currently, only two names are trading at a premium to the 10-year bond rate, which are A-REIT with a yield at 6.4% and C-REIT at 6.3%. And all the other REITs in our coverage, RCR, PhilREIT, MREIT, are all trading now at a discount following the recent price corrections. So to conclude, unfortunately, what's happening externally will likely derail the country's economic recovery. And with this in mind, our general advice for clients is to shift to a more defensive approach, stay away from speculative stocks, and bottom fish only on quality and defensive names. And if able, of course, try to raise cash as a percentage of total portfolio in order to take advantage of bigger dips to re-enter or to add new positions. So what we actually have learned from the previous crisis is that the market is always comes back, and sometimes the recovery is quite swift. So stay nimble and be on the lookout for possible trading opportunities. Thank you, and passing the floor back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Rach, for your very timely discussion. No? And at this point, we'd like to open the floor for questions. I'd also like to invite the rest of the research team back to join us. So Greg, Alistair, Brian, Paul will be joining us for the Q&A portion. So for everyone joining us today, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to cover as many questions as we can given the time that we have today. So, just to start off some of the questions, uh, we did talk about the more macro view today during the presentation, but I know all our analysts focus on the respective sectors and subsectors in the market. So I'm hoping to hear from each of our analysts today on their specific outlook for their sectors that they cover. Are there any companies, I know we mentioned a few in the last few slides, are there any companies as investors that we should watch out for that could be heavily affected by the ongoing conflict? And um, what are the sectors that you guys cover that might actually be more resilient to macro stress? So maybe we can start with Paul, as Rach did mention. Paul, you cover REITs, property, and the consumer sectors. Maybe we can start with property and REITs. Are we seeing any weakness or strength with some of the REIT names?
Thanks, Sab. Good morning, everyone, once again, and thank you for joining us in this morning's presentation. So, I'd like to add to what Rach mentioned earlier about the stock price weakness of the REITs in the Philippine Stock Exchange. So, we saw a sell down. We saw this sell down basically as a reaction from the ongoing Middle East conflict and the anticipated impact of this conflict not only on the oil prices, not only on inflation, but also on policy rates and bond yields. Because bond yields go, they because an increase in bond yields have headwinds in terms of the valuation of the REIT companies. So, for example, since the start of the Iran conflict, government bond yield rose from 5.9% pre-conflict to 6.8%. So, this is already ahead of the dividend yields from several REITs like CREIT, and ARIT. And so there's a significant pressures for REITs not only to catch up, but also to increase their dividend yields, which is still a function of the dividends per share. And because of the lower spread between the dividend yield and the bond yield, there's movement to the bonds because they are lower risk securities. And but on my end, I think the sell down appears to be overdone because we also need to focus not only on the yield but also on the upside or the from the fair value that these companies provide or these companies reflect from our valuation. So first, we need to focus on the pipeline of the infusion. which remains to be intact because developers were planning to, continue capital recycling through their through future property for share swap, which will be positive to the dividends of the REITs. Second, the occupancy and rental rates of our covered REITs from our observation remains to be ahead of industry because of curated assets, diversification to non-office buildings, and quality locations, which are mostly in key CBDs. And third, of course, the liquidity and net debt of REITs remains to be lower compared to property names. So our pick on REITs continues to be RCR. Its yield is now at 7.1% with an upside of 25%. And I guess it will also be supported despite the geopolitical disruption by its prolonged WALE or prolonged leases of around 4 to 5 years.
All right. Thanks so much, Paul, for giving us some insight on the property and REIT sector. Um, Now, I'd also like to ask, because was mentioned, Bri, um, how how's your coverage or the companies you're covering for your sectors? How are they looking? Any companies in specific going to be affected by higher oil prices and higher inflation?
Okay. Yes, Sam. I'll just tackle that. So, following the immediate increase in the prices of oil, I think there are also a number of key commodities that will track the increase, no? So, starting with oil, one of the companies that we cover is actually Cebu Air. So, their key commodity is jet fuel, which usually basically prices at a premium, a bit over spot barrel. So, I think in our sensitivity, it shows that if ever it were to reach around more than $120 per barrel for jet fuel, Seb would have a difficult time achieving profitability. So I think if the conflict is prolonged, airlines might be challenged, particularly because of um, not only because of the increased cost of jet fuel, but because of sourcing the fuel itself. So moving on to other commodities, I think vegetable oils, palm oil, and coconut oil will all similarly track the increase in oil prices. So um, F&B manufacturers might have maybe more narrow margins this year compared to last year. And I think aside from that, tuna prices might also be affected because a lot of fishing fleets rely on oil um, for their um, for their fishing operations, especially if it's out in open sea. So I think we can expect that maybe a lot of consumer companies would have more narrow margins this year.
Thanks, Bri. So yeah, definitely transportation is a big sector that will be affected. Um, Now, bringing questions regarding telecoms and conglomerates, maybe we can ask Greg, what is your outlook for the utilities, telecom, and conglomerate sectors? How do you feel like they will perform in the coming month or so, given the conflict?
Thanks, Sab. So for utilities, I think the impact of the profits is virtually none at the moment because fuel cost is primarily neutral for them. It's more primarily passed on to consumers. However, there are some political, I guess, implications when it comes to the impact of oil to the utility prices. For example, Meralco is trying to manage the overall generation cost, which will be passed on to consumers. So they're trying to source more fuel from cheaper sources like Malampaya so that they could manage the increase to consumers. So the impact is more really on the political side of the equation for the power utilities. For water utilities, there's no direct impact of the oil hike to the water rates. but the water utilities adjust for the inflation every month. So there's an adjustment that will be felt there. But the share of wallet for water utilities is smaller compared to power, so we won't really feel that as consumers. We will feel though is the Meralco power adjustments. For telecoms, there's no historical evidence that higher oil prices have impacted mobile or fuel usage in the past. However, when we spoke to companies yesterday, they said that the consumer wallets might be tightened in the coming months because of the higher oil prices, and therefore that could have some impact when it comes to your mobile and fiber top ups, which could in turn affect the growth of these segments for the telecoms. Nonetheless, we view the telecoms as a dividend play, so the dividend yields I think are still sustainable above the 6 to 7% threshold, which I think should bode well for investors if you're buying at these levels. For conglomerates, the impact is a bit different. So in some segments, I think the impact won't be felt. For example, like BPI or with Globe, in terms of AC, we probably won't see the impact of the higher oil prices. But with some companies like Ali, so there might be some delayed in the big ticket purchase items. So this was also echoed by the management of AC. For GT Cap, there could be some impact for their Toyota operations, given that the sales of cars sometimes is related to the price of oil. But I think that could be short term in nature, and the weakness on the stock could likely be a chance to buy it. As I've said before, the price of GT Cap right now is just two times in terms of price to earnings if we look at it on the TMP or Toyota level. So if you compare that to the prices of Toyota abroad, it's more than 10 times P. So we're virtually valuing the stock at just one fourth what it's supposed to be. So it's really a chance to buy the conglomerates at a cheap level as well. So that's mainly it, Sam. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. So water bills might be okay, but we have to stay cautious to all of our electric bills. So we'll see. We'll see in the coming months what happens there. Speaking of power, Alistair, you also cover some power mining and utilities stock. So how are we looking on your end?
Yeah. So right now we see elevated prices from the spot given the geopolitical tensions, um, rising the input cost, particularly the oil and gas prices now. So we are seeing an elevated levels of spot over the near term. So assuming that the war de-escalate within the month. So these benefits for the companies with high exposure to spot. So basically, it's ASEN and SEC, and we think that every 1 peso per kilowatt hour spot price hike that would increase their profitability by around 10 to 13%. Now, on the longer term outlook, once the geopolitical noise fades, the structural picture flips because there are a lot of renewables that will come in, and this should outpace the demand growth. And hence, the narrative would be drift back to lower spot price. But this assumes that the war de-escalates as soon as possible.
So good outlook for renewable energy currently, even um with the cars and vehicles, renewable vehicles. So last I'll just bring back Rich. For your sectors that you cover bankings, conglomerates. What's your outlook for them in the coming few months given the Iran war?
Yes, I'll start off with the banking sector. So if you look back during the 2023 high inflation period, typically there's a general correction for the market, and that of course filters through to your banking names, which are also heavy weights in the index, no. But generally the immediate impact I see is of course on the NPL formation. So much of the growth for the past 2 to 3 years, in general, came from the consumer sector. And initially, of course, when borrowing costs go up, then that would sort of impact your the consumers' ability to be able to pay their loans on time. So with that, what we actually look for is the capitalization of the banks that we cover. And you can see that across the sector, actually, the capital ratios are very high. So I think the big banks closer to 14 to 15%. Some of the banks that I think even the other banks are well above where the buffers or the I think the floor set by the BSP. So far, in terms of capitalization, we have adequate buffers. Just watch out for possible NPL formations. Now, after the initial increase in inflation, of course, you would see the BSP doing some potential policy actions. And the initial response, of course, by the central bank is to hike interest rates. So we saw that in 2023, and that contributed to the big increase in net income for banks towards the 2024, right? So essentially, banks could benefit from potentially higher rates if the BSP would proceed with rate hikes. So I think good to pick up already, especially as the big banks are all trading below their one times price to book. So now moving on to the mining sector, I think the prices of gold remains high, still above $5,000 per ounce. Even copper and silver are also trading at elevated levels. And I think moving on from the price action or the price increases last year, the general theme also for this year is the potential increase in the volumes, as mines have or the mining companies have also been doing exploration activities in order to lengthen the mine life, no? So this is an initial response when prices are high. Usually you these mines generate higher free cash flow, so they're able to explore more within their mining areas. So generally still positive, and as we know, mining companies are also exporters, so they benefit when the dollar or the peso dollar level is also if it reaches the $60 range. So yeah.
All right, thanks so much, Rach. Um, so we have another question here. Focusing, we talked about REITs, but now focusing on the impact of the US-Iran conflict on the property sector as a whole, not just on REITs. So, maybe Paul, maybe you can answer this question.
Thanks, Sab. There are three factors that are at play here, no? You have higher oil prices, weakened OFW remittances, and of course, the impact of inflationary pressures on the policy rates. And we think that the spillover impact of these factors on the properties could be exacerbated if the war is prolonged. So this will likely dampen sentiments and also reduce big ticket purchases, particularly on cars and house and lots and condo units. This will hit developers with high exposure on residential segment. An example of those developers that have more than 50% of revenues that are reliant on the residential will be Mega World and Ayala Land. An example of this potential impact will be tempered launches for the year, as developers will be more careful with launching projects. And because several projects will be completed this year, we also think that developers would sustain or would introduce discounts and promos to attract spending, particularly on the core segment. Meanwhile, OFW spending, if the war was prolonged, especially on the Middle East areas, will be particularly affected, and we see it affecting the pre-sales digits for this year. However, we are more positive in comparison to the resi segment. We are more positive on the recurring leasing segments. On malls, we think that higher oil prices could discourage outside mobility. However, support on the mall rental revenue should still come from the fixed rental lease rates that mall developers have been charging on their tenants, and also essential spending that is flowing on mall tenants with malls on key locations and key CBDs. Meanwhile, on the office segment, despite work from home arrangement of some offices like increasing the work from home days, we still expect that there would be leases sign-ups and renewals, because of course they still need to go to the offices for their on-site days now. And additionally, we talked to developers during this past earnings season, and several of their tenants have prolonged sign-ups of 3 to 4 years. Wale of some of our covered companies have is around this range also, 3 to 4 years, with fixed escalation and rental rates, which remains ahead of peers. And I guess it could also secure revenue streams. Aside from that, protectionist US policy, such as the visa fees in the US, should shore up offshoring, particularly on the global capability center. So these are the types of business process outsourcing which acts as back offices of multinational companies. These are higher quality and these are less routinary compared to the third party outsourcing, which is and on our end, we continue to like RLC among our coverage. So amid macro headwinds, we like the company's stronger liquidity and balance sheets. Its dividend yield is currently at 4.6%, which is higher compared to its peers. And of course, its strong leasing revenue, which makes up three-fourths of its total top line.
All right, thanks so much, Paul. Actually, we have a question from the audience that's related to what you were discussing. Uh the question is, do you think physical mobility would decrease with the current oil crisis, which would affect the projected income of, it says here, REITs companies, but looks like could also affect properties and malls, no? Because if people aren't going out more, how could this affect our property and especially malls, and for our other analysts, if you think as well physical mobility or people not going out more might affect your sectors, maybe you could also give your thoughts on this question. So Paul, maybe you can start with you first.
Thanks, Sab, and thank you for that question. So I'd like to delve first on the malls now, because for REITs, there are two ways on how they charge rental revenue. So first, you have REITs like ARIT who are charging mall revenue at a fixed escalation rate, sometimes at around 3 to 5%. While there are other REITs like RCR who are charging through a 60/40 rate. What is that? 60%, so the rental rate that they are charging to their tenants are 60% variable and 40% fixed escalation rate. So if you look at that lens, it will be more favorable on REITs with so the despite the situation, the one that have a fixed escalation rate will be more favored despite the decrease or despite the decline in foot traffic or lower variable rates. But also, we also need to acknowledge that there are also office segments. Aside from malls, REITs also have office segments, and some of these office segments have prolonged lease sign-ups of 3 to 4 years. And in this case, RCR still have longer wale compared to ARIT. RCR has a wale of around 4 years, meanwhile ARIT's offices is at around 3.2 years. So it's really so at the end of the day, it's really two ways between malls and offices.
All right, thank you so much, Paul. Um, so another question here. What would be the worst case scenario if the oil crisis would last for a year or beyond? What diversification strategy would you recommend to mitigate the risk exposure of your investment? Maybe, Rach, you could answer this one.
Yes, I think from what we have discussed earlier, the worst case scenario really is a stagflation wherein your inflation is growing faster than your GDP growth. And this will be more likely if the war is prolonged for over a year or so. I think as an equity investor, the first step is really to reevaluate now your personal finances. As if you look at equities, it's a risky asset. And so focus should really be on risk management. So as what we have mentioned earlier, so this is not the time to really be on speculative stocks. So if ever you have those in your portfolio, maybe there should be a rethink of whether you should be holding on to these shares, as these stocks also tend to be those that will be heavily sold down if ever a crisis pushes through. And then, of course, the focus would be right now on the defensive stocks. I think Greg mentioned earlier about the prospects for the power and the water utility sector, as well as I think Brian covers also the port operator ICT, which is a global and diversified name. Then yeah, so basically for the other stocks that we are neutral or we are negative on, or other sectors that we are neutral or negative on, maybe the focus would be on the valuations and the quality of these names. So we already had a lot of crises in the past. We had COVID, and we had the high inflation period in 2022. And what we really learned at that time is the bounce back is quite fast for those names that are, very resilient. So you have the blue chips, but I think we really have to be selective at this point. So I guess from that end, maybe can also focus on the dividend yield names. So you also have some sort of buffer if in case there's continued downward pressure on the stock prices. So basically, yeah, be defensive. And for those looking to bottom fish, just focus on the quality blue chips and try to avoid or minimize um trading speculative names.
All right, thanks, Rach. Actually, I think that also answered a few other questions. People were asking, what sectors or what companies we recommend. So I think Rach was able to answer those. Another question we have, I think this can be for Paul. Not super related to the oil crisis, but it says here, given the AI industry boom and the oil crisis, would it still be okay to buy hold REITs, given that the AI will or could heavily affect the BPO industry and REIT leases are heavily dependent on the BPO industry? So, Paul.
Thanks, Sab. I guess I'll also relate it to my discussion earlier, no. The sentiments, the sell down that we've been seeing on REITs is also affected or is also implied by the or sorry, is also influenced by the government by the increase in government yield. So I think in congruence to that, moving on the AI and BPOs, we've also talked with several of the companies. Okay. Some of them acknowledge the risk of AI. However, developers are also seeing the AI boom at a different lens. They are looking at it as a way to complement, according to several of their tenants. AI has been used or has been utilized as a way to complement or fasten workplace output or workplace or some of their strategies, you know. And aside from that, companies are also moving towards higher quality global capability centers, the one that I mentioned earlier. So this involves back office support to multinational companies in the United States. And this also involves essential roles like in healthcare and finance. So they are not only contributing, the routinary roles that we are usually attached to the idea of BPOs like call centers, etc. But they're also providing knowledge or providing information that many developers, and not only the developers but also the tenants, acknowledge that AI, this knowledge won't be able to be replicated by AI. So for example, during the fourth quarter of 2025, there's still an increase in take up in global capability centers. For full year of 2025, global capability center, the take up or the office take up of global capability centers increased by 67% year on year. So it shows that there's demand coming from multinational companies to come here in the Philippines. And I also wanted to add, Philippines only has around 100, between 100 to 200 global capability centers, whereas in India, that's around 2,000 to 3,000. So what I'm suggesting is that there's still a broad market for the Philippines, not only for the Philippines, but also for the Filipino talent as a whole to to be absorbed by these up and coming BPO types that can be that would be less likely affected by the AI boom.
All right, thank you so much, Paul. So we still have time for a few more questions. Um, I have here a question maybe for Rich regarding the banking sector. So it says here BPI and other banking stocks are low right now. When is the outlook for it to recover? So I do know we touched about this a little bit during the discussion, especially given that there's pressure as well for the BSP. They might have increase rates. So how will this affect banking stocks?
Yeah, so I think that's right. No, I think most of the banks are trading at one times or even below their book value already, following the sell down across the market. So this mainly affected also those banks that are in the PSEI. So we have BPI, BDO, Metro Bank, as well. China Bank is um also sold down. So in general, usually when you have these trade flows or foreign outflows, hot money flows going out of the market, sometimes the selling is quite deliberate. And for this four names, at least the big three banks, we saw general sell off. So in terms of outlook for recovery, so first, I think there will be some sort of I mean, people will watch out for the NPL accounts. So if there's NPL formation, I think we also saw that during the COVID crisis, if it's something that will be worrying. So that's one. Then second is the ability of the banks to also absorb these losses. So typically, you have increased provisioning when times are hard, and this impacts directly your earnings. So far, for covered names, I think the earnings growth is just about 3% for this year. So that's very conservative already. And so, moving forward, what would be the catalyst to re-rating? As I mentioned earlier, usually it happens when inflation peaks and the BSP starts hiking interest rates. So that's something that's positive for the banking sector. And it also happened in around 2023. So far, of course, I think our base case scenario doesn't really predict any rate hikes unless the conflict will be prolonged for over a month. So for now, we think the general catalyst will still be on credit growth as well as if the banks are able to control NPL formation. So yes. And I think we have one last question here on which companies we recommend more on to invest. I'll pass the floor to Brian, Greg, as well as Alistair, because out of the BPI stock picks for 2026, I think we have three names that have been performing very well, and that's ICT, AP, and Meralco. So, these companies have very resilient business models. We continue to see earnings visibility in the horizon, regardless of what's happening right now. So I'll pass the floor over to them for any comments and possible discussion on why they like these stocks.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Actually, I think that will be our last question then for today. So maybe we can go one by one. We can start with Meralco first. Greg, what's our outlook on Meralco?
Thanks, Seb. So for Meralco, we continue to like the stock. We think there's three reasons why we think Meralco should re-rate. So first, distribution utilities such as Meralco hasn't been able to adjust the distribution tariff for more than 10 years. Well, we do see that the oil prices can delay the tariff hike. I think this is more a matter of when rather than if. So I think the ERC has already adopted more openness to the new methods of regulated asset base and regulated returns, and that will enable Meralco to raise DU tariffs in our view. The other two reasons are because there's a high dividend yield for Meralco that insulates the stock from significant sell downs and a relatively high weight in the PSEI. So most funds would likely take an overweight position on Meralco. And then my last point would be Meralco Power Generation is growing its earnings. So right now it's going to make around 16 billion for the year. And over the next 5 years, it can double the profits to around 30 billion once the new capacity comes online. So I think most of these support a strong share price in our view. And Morocco is a defensive utility. So despite an economic downturn, they still tend to do well, regardless of the inflation or oil price impact on their business.
All right. Thank you so much, Greg. Now, maybe I can pass the floor to Alistair to discuss his outlook naman for EP or Aboitiz Power.
Okay, so I'll start off with the business model of Aboitiz Power. So they currently have combined portfolio of both base load and peaking facilities, so they can capture midday to evening pricing, which allows them to which have some sort of flexibility in terms of their revenues in times of spot prices hikes and contract prices. So in addition to that, as mentioned by Greg earlier, that these gencos have power supply agreements, and they can basically pass through their fuel cost. So even if coal and LNG benchmarks price spikes, the incremental input cost would not be shouldered by the AP. So, but in terms of outlook, we like AP due to its growing capacity. So recently turned the CBK around 789 megawatts is immediately accretive. So we estimate around 2.5 billion in incremental earnings. So that's around 7% of AP's profits, with an upside from the ancillary market contracts as more intermittent renewables enter the grid. And there are three solar plants, which is Loag, Armenia, and Calatrava, that are running in a full year run rate, and upcoming 600 megawatt of the GIA awarded capacity, which is slated for the next 2 years. And on the distribution side, it is growing steady at around 4 to 5% volume growth. So this should provide leeway for AP's stable growth and sector leading ROE. So yeah, passing floor to Brian.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Alistair. So, one of our top picks is ICT, and it's actually been doing very well, this year. So, just to give you an understanding of how ICT earns its revenues and its reaction towards this global crisis, ICT sports are located in D&O locations, meaning destination and origin. So there's an inflow and outflow of goods, and normally it's consumer goods that flow in and out. So that by itself makes its business very resilient. If you look at it historically, during the pandemic, it's actually grown, and how would I say this? It's also a beneficiary for the global shift in trade flows. So just to give you an example, ICT does have a port in the Middle East in Basra, and it's been affected by the crisis. However, their latest addition to their portfolio, which is Durban, has been an indirect beneficiary of the shift. So ships that used to be routed through the Strait of Hormuz now have to pass, I think, around the Cape of Good Hope. So that they actually benefit from that. And to give you an example also, um one of their ports in Ecuador ships a lot of bananas and raw fruit. So a lot of the shipments that were bound for the Middle East now were redirected towards Asia, in which they have a lot of ports, especially in the ASEAN region. So my third point as well, if you've been tracking the PSE disclosures, I think Razon has been slowly buying back again with the dips. So confidence from management is always a good sign. So we think that ICT is one of those companies that can ride out the storm.
All right, thank you so much, Alistair and Bry. And that actually wraps up today's session. So, on behalf of BPI Trade, we extend our thanks to our speakers from the BPI Trade research team. So, Rach, Greg, Paul, Brian, Alistair, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And of course, to all of our attendees, we hope today's discussion provided some clarity on how these ongoing global events, particularly oil price movements and geopolitical tensions, can influence markets and also our everyday life. So if you haven't opened your BPI Trade account yet, we encourage you to do so and take the next step in becoming a more informed and empowered investor. Thank you once again for joining us, and let's always remember to make investing a habit so we can trade better, live better. Have a good rest of your day and happy lunch.